I'm going to let Amber start. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Jennifer Oxford, and I am a certified independent Optavia coach, and I'm a clinical mental health counselor. And I've been a mental health counselor for 16 years, and I've been an Optavia coach for 3. And one of the things that really drew me to Optavia was the opportunity to really work on mindset and this idea of lifelong health. And as we're getting ready, I'm going to put up our slideshow. I'm going to share with you guys our slideshow. But I want you to, if you are just logging on, put your identity, either your positive or negative identity, something I am or am not, and go ahead and put that in the chat. And as you start thinking about that, think about what's your health identity, right? What's going on with you? I'm trying to see if there's a way for me to see the chat. Okay. Oh, I like it. And oh, Natalie, a hard worker, that's a value identity. That's awesome. Okay, Tass, I've seen a lot of relationship identities, but let's talk about identity development. Ooh, I'm liking some of these. Guys, one of the things that drew me to Optavia is this idea of lifelong transformation. I do not identify as a dieter, you guys. I'm not a dieter. I don't think dieting is something I would ever do, but I really needed health. I needed it. It was very, very important to me. And so when I learned about Optavia, I learned about lifelong transformation, this concept of what it means. And it's been interesting because the process of it has really changed the way I identify in wonderful ways, in scary ways, in ways I did not expect. But we're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to give you a broad overview of identity, just so you can we're going to talk about kind of how it gets formed. We're going to talk about the different types of identity. And then we're going to talk about when our identity gets stuck in the fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, so that you guys can kind of get to that place of what if I am in a fixed mindset with my identity and what can I do? Okay. So we're going to talk about 3 types of change. In Optavia, we are transformation masters in Optavia, right? Have any of you experienced a transformation? Just put a 1 in the chat if you might have transformed anything in your life due to Optavia, right? And notice that levels of change start with outcomes. Most of us came to Optavia because we wanted an outcome, right? We were results focused, like losing weight, winning a race. Okay, I'll slow down, guys. Or paying off some extra bills, or just I want a better relationship with food. It could have been many, many things. When we got to Optavia, they said, hey guys, guess what? We have a system, and the system and the science is awesome. And we come in and we learn the process and we get into a system. It doesn't even matter what the system is, as long as you're involved in a system within Optavia. And I tell my clients all the time, I don't care which plan you're doing, but not doing a plan is when we get lost, right? We need a system and we need habits. Those things like a new routine, daily exercise, we're really working on that. But lifelong transformation comes from the next level of change, which is when we go to our identity. This is our beliefs, our labels, our goals, our plans, and our dreams. So as we talk about this, when we get stuck anywhere, part of what we might be doing is working on an identity issue and not just a systems issue. And I found this to be really true. Okay, so how does your identity get created? How old do you guys think you are when your identity is formed and solidified? Go ahead and put it in the chat. How old do you think you are when it is formed and solidified? Okay, I've got 4, 3, 7 to 12, 8, 14, never, 7. I will tell you the truth is it's different for every person, depending on your life experiences and your mindset, right? For a fixed mindset person, it probably is formed. For somebody who experienced a lot of really hard life experiences, and we're going to talk about those things, it got formed and it's really hard to change it, right? So we're going to talk about some basics. You all are humans. We've got that in common. You might have experienced the following things. You might have been born, right? When you were born, you noticed you had a body. Your body would sometimes get hungry. It needed to breathe. It wanted to sleep. Sometimes it wanted to go to the bathroom. Sometimes it wanted to be held. Sometimes it wanted to be left alone, right? And you went through this whole body identity, right? People started labeling you as a baby. You may not have even heard it, but you heard it in their voice. Oh, you're so cute. Oh my gosh, he's so cute. Oh my gosh, he's so handsome. He's going to be a ladies' man. We label kids at 3 years old like they're going to start dating. I don't know what's wrong with us, because when they get to the dating age, we stop. We're like, oh no, don't do that, right? The next thing we do is we start to realize, oh, there are other people in my life. I have parents. I might have siblings. Depending on who showed up in your life, you might have different feelings about that. That is not this topic tonight, but I want you to think about those family relationships. From those family relationships, we realized that there were people outside of our family. You went to the park and there were different kids. You might have gone to preschool. You might have gone to a community event and realized, oh my gosh, other people do things differently than my family. And then you started in school and you started to learn, and there was a huge identity with intelligence, that there's lots of labeling in school with intelligence. There's what we call creative identity that gets developed and changed in school. And then you guys, this amazing thing happens. I like to refer to it as the armpit of life, called middle school, right? There's nothing exciting that happens in middle school other than you go through this intense understanding of whether people accept you or reject you. I just want you to put a 1 in the chat if you had an intense experience in middle school, right? I promise you, everyone does. Okay, and then with acceptance, one thing happens with our identity, and with rejection, another thing happens. And we're going to talk about these words. You don't have to memorize them. But when you think about where did your identity come from, it came from all these micro and macro experiences, those little big experiences that you had. Yes, if you survive middle school, you can do anything. That's so true. Okay, but what about as an adult? I think most of us here survived middle school. Survival might be a strong term for others. Some people totally sailed through. That's great. But what happens next, right? And I want to talk to you about that, because as adults, we still have the ability to affect our identity, but sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we get on this little wheel called life and we just start identifying by what we're doing and going on around us, right? It's true, Annabelle. Okay, so part of what we're going to do, right, is just check in with yourself, and I want everyone to check in with yourself about a couple things. One, with your identity, do you have a growth mindset, right? And then with your commitment to your identity. So let's take an example of one of my identities is I am a puppy mom right now, 10-week-old puppy, you guys. I don't sleep well. I know some of you think that I have no idea, but it's not going well. I am committed to get through the puppy stage. I think I will not always be a puppy mom, and I am definitely not committed to staying a puppy mom. Somebody asked me if I ever wanted to breed puppies, and I just said no, thank you. But think about it, growth mindset happens, and then our commitment to our identity. I'm going to stop sharing real quick and share a little part of my story. So when I entered Optavia, I had been overweight since 9 years old. And it never got better, it only got worse. And I had even had surgery and thought that through all my experiences, all my acceptance and rejection experiences, that my identity was just that I was going to be overweight. And that was okay, because I could go to school, I could love people, I was really kind and generous. Most of the time, I'm not perfect, but I did those things and I created this identity, and I kind of ignored my health because I felt no control. I felt a lot of rejection in that area. So when I did that, I had a fixed mindset when I came to my health, and I was committed based on all the rejections, not based on whether I wanted to get better. And because of that, I ended up in what we call identity diffusion. And we're going to talk about that for a minute. I actually because I think a lot of people come to Optavia with this concept of identity diffusion. So I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm going to share my screen again. I like to not share it the whole time because it's weird to me when people are on there, but okay, so identity diffusion happens. Think about this. We're going to break this down. When a person is overwhelmed by achieving, by trying, we're overwhelmed by this concept of, I've done so many things, right? Just think about how many times you've said that. I've tried so hard. I've done so many things. It's not working. And we just stop. We just give up. That's what we do. It's called diffusion. And identity diffusion is, I no longer am going to try. It's probably a little bit where my anti-running comes in. I refuse to try anymore, but I'm going to try someday. It's just not going to happen this week, guys. Okay, but that's where I've been. And so what I want to do is I actually want to have my friend Kristen come on, and she is going to share a little bit about her health story. When I thought about identity diffusion, I thought, who's really great is Kristen, and I want you guys to hear her story. So I'm going to stop sharing and let Kristen come on.
Thanks, Jen. I'm excited to share a little bit about my story. So at a very early age, my identity was focused on athletics. So around 12 years of age, I started playing competitive soccer, and I based a lot of my self-esteem and worth on how many goals I would score in my most recent game. And then in high school, I continued playing soccer. I also started running track, and I had a much more promising future with track. So I started basing a lot of my self-esteem and worth on what we call in track a PR, which stands for a personal record. So luckily, I had a really amazing coach who highly emphasized these PRs, these personal records. And he would treat you, if you got a PR, he would treat you with the same enthusiasm as the state champion. So I was able to focus a lot on my own personal progress instead of comparing it to others, but it was still highly focused on this achievement. Even if it was between me and myself, I didn't fully understand that one day it wouldn't even be a part of my life. It was like the only part of my life. And I knew that, I knew I wasn't going to be running track at 30 years old, but I just didn't really comprehend where that left my identity. So I never really stopped to think about who I was without athletics in my life. And so much of my self-esteem and confidence came from both of those areas. So I ended up going to college on a full ride track scholarship, and my identity became even more centered around athletics. I would literally sleep, breathe, eat, go on dates according to my track schedule. And I even chose my major based on, I chose exercise science, which is what every other athlete chose. And it was great. I was passionate and interested about it, but I was very much a sprinter athlete first, and then a college student and anything else second. So come my senior year, it's a conference championship, and I was going for the school record in the 100-meter dash. And I pulled my hamstring in the finals of the 4x100-meter relay the race before. So that was just supposed to be kind of like my warm-up race. I didn't even get a chance to run the final 100-meter race. And I felt devastated. I felt like all of my hard work had just been completely for nothing. And it was because I didn't have that final achievement, that final accomplishment to give me that external validation that I had become so dependent on. So just like that, college was over, track was over. And where did that leave me? It didn't end how I wanted it to. I had based so much of my identity on something that could so easily be taken away. So during the years that followed, I tried to find my identity and purpose in helping others get healthy. And the only way I knew how to do that was through exercise. So I worked as an exercise physiologist with cardiac rehab patients at the hospital, and a significant number of my patients were overweight. And so we would talk to them and recommend that they need to lose weight if they wanted to significantly decrease the chances of having another cardiac event. And so they would say, okay, great. How do I do that? And the only thing I knew how to do was prescribe an exercise program. So they would follow that exercise program perfectly. And at least from my own personal experience, I can't speak for everyone, but the 3 years that I worked there, I didn't see a single patient have success with weight loss. And I just thought that they just needed to exercise harder and longer and more. And I kind of put the blame on them not doing enough of it. I had studied exercise science in college, like I said, so that was all I had learned. Shortly afterwards, while I was still working there, I was introduced to this amazing program. And I was very skeptical of it at first because it was just so different than anything what I thought I knew to be true. Because first of all, the main focus, at least for weight loss, was nutrition. And then second, get this, was mindset. And I was like, as if a healthy mindset can do more than exercising for 2 hours a day. Turns out it can. And so I started coaching clients and they started actually seeing results. And they weren't even doing it through exercise. But my favorite part about the program for me is that it has taught me how to be the creator of my own life, which in other words, I think is the creator of my own identity. So I'm learning, I'm not perfect yet, but I try to not base my entire identity on these external achievements or on things that can just be taken away in an instant. So my identity no longer includes things like PRs set in a track meet or number of goals scored in a soccer game. Me and my husband still play soccer once a week and I enjoy it. And that's part of, I'm all of these identities and I play soccer. But now I try to focus on things like I'm thoughtful, I'm empathetic, I'm hardworking and unique. And all of those for me can be summarized in one word, which is creator. And that's what this program has given me. It's a new identity that I can create a life centered around what matters most to me.
Thank you, Kristen. So powerful. And I love that as a coach and in Optavia, I have met people who come from all different identities and they still go through the same identity change. Everyone goes through an identity change when you're working on lifelong transformation. Everybody, right? So while Kristen identified as an athlete, I did not. I identified in different ways, but you know what? When Kristen and I go to events, we are friends and we hang out because we both identify now as creators and as coaches and as people who love and care about our families. And that's so important. So let's talk, I'm going to screen share again. Let's talk about a different type of identity because I want to make sure we go through all four so you guys can kind of just ask yourself where you're at. That's really, I don't know if I'm sharing the right thing. Hold on just a second. Okay, I'm actually going to go to, talked about diffusion. Okay, let's talk about foreclosure. So a lot of adults have heard the term foreclosure. It can be very scary for adults. Okay, so this is what it means. And you can have identity foreclosure. Foreclosure happens when a person is, sorry, this is not the right thing. I'll tell you what foreclosure really is. Foreclosure is when somebody gives you your identity, when somebody tells you who you are, right? So if you were told, oh, you know, you're so pretty, right? Or you're the pretty one, or you're the smart one, or you must be a basketball player because you're so tall, or you look like a football player, right? We get a lot of health identities, right? I got a lot of health identities as a kid in the form of bullying. And it was like, that's who people told me I was. And I got a lot of that. And there was, you know, and then I thought, oh, well, I don't even want to talk to them. But the problem was they were all the ones who were working on their health. And so I did what people did, and I moved away from where I could grow, right? And it was a really kind of a different experience. But I want to go back to, sorry, I'm going to go back real quick to what identity moratorium means. And this is a big word. And you guys, I've been working with teenagers for 16 years, and I work with the hardest teenagers. If you think teenagers are hard, I promise you, I work with the hardest in the nation when it comes to teenagers. Okay. And this is the time when they're forming their identity, right? And I know some of you feel that deep inside working with somebody who's trying to form their identity in a way that feels very hard. But I want you to know that moratorium is the goal for teenagers. This is the goal. And as an adult, especially with your health, especially with this program, moratorium is your goal. It's my goal, and it is exactly what we do. And this is the process of exploring, of what, and curiously finding out what is the best fit for you, right? So who remembers, just put a 1 in the chat, if you had a major style shift as a teenager. Did any of you wear a certain type of makeup suddenly different, or you might have wore a different kind of clothing suddenly differently? If maybe you identified with a certain peer group and then switched, and that's really normal, okay? I actually lean into this a lot with teenagers, and I say, great, let's pick a hat, let's wear it for 3 months, let's check in on how you feel, and then let's pick another hat. And you know what? They love it. They love it. You know what happens when I say your hat looks bad on you? Sure you do, because you've all seen what happens when people say the hat. And when we say that's the only hat you should wear, right? Because that's called foreclosure, right? If I say the hat looks bad on you, that's diffusion. If I say, hey, that's an interesting hat, what are you learning from it? Right? How does it feel? Goth was really big when I was a teenager in high school, right? So how does wearing all black, how does that feel for you? What are you noticing? What's the music, right? But then you can shift. So when I started program, I was 415 pounds. I didn't identify as a dieter. I did not identify as anyone who could weigh less than 300 pounds for sure. That was ridiculous. I didn't identify as a health coach at all. And I did not identify as somebody who was even in the health realm, right? In fact, I won't go into a lot of our story, but that was really kind of afraid that I wouldn't live very long. That was where I was at. But when people presented this program to me, it was the opportunity to wear a different hat. And I said, no, you guys, I totally said no. So if you're like, I'm a skeptic, Jen, you don't understand I'm a skeptic, I will say, not only do I understand, but I'm with you. I'm a therapist. I'm a huge skeptic. Okay, guys. But I saw my husband, and my husband actually started program first and lost 100 pounds before I would join the program, right? 100 pounds. And he started out walking. That was my identity. My identity in my marriage was that I walked faster than my husband. Thank goodness his identity changed so that mine could too, right? And I went through this saying, what is curious? And I did a health assessment, and they said, what would your goal weight be? And I said, I have no idea. Because remember, identity, it connects to your dreams and your experiences and all these things. Because I had no idea. I said, I just would like my husband to live longer. That was my goal. It was my initial why when I came in. My identity was fully in relationships. I just want you to notice and put a 1 in the chat if your identity right now is fully in relationships. And I just want to just give you a little love, because I understand sometimes we get lost in our relationships. Okay, but let's talk about how we get out of that loss. Okay, I'm going to go, went through diffusion, foreclosure, Kristen. Okay, guys, identity achievement happens when we go through moratorium, right? And then we choose the hat we want. Notice I get to choose. Nobody assigned me a hat. I get to choose, which means if right now I identify as somebody on the 5 and 1, and that's working for me, I get to keep that. I get to choose to keep it. Nobody's forcing on it. My coach does not hold it on my head and say, Jennifer, don't you take that hat off. That's not how it works, right? Now, if I decide to take my hat off, I have all the consequences of taking my hat off, right? If I decide someday that I'm going to buy running shoes and I decide to start running, I will put my hat on. I will go find other runners and I will start to figure that piece out, right? But I want you to notice that you get to choose after, you guys see the word after here, exploring other options. If you did, you guys, I lived, gosh, what was I? It was the year I turned 40 that I found this program. I explored being an overweight adult for over 20 years. And then I decided to explore something else. Can I tell you, your identity never stops changing if you're willing to let it move. You don't ever have to do that, right? And then you guys, you find, we go back, actually, hold on. I should have copied my slides. Okay, let's go back to what this is. We talked about moratorium, right? Moratorium is when we have a high growth, low commitment. We are not committed to this hat, right? Foreclosure, no growth. Somebody gave it to me, but I have to stay super committed to it. This is the labels. Diffusion, I have no growth and no commitment, right? That's your teenagers, right? I'm just kidding. We're working with them. Moratorium, guys, right? Switch the hat. And then achievement. I have both a growth mindset and I'm super committed to it. Can you guys feel the shift there when it comes to your identity? And I just, as you're noticing this, if you want to, go ahead and put in the chat where you think you are. Are you in moratorium right now? Is your coach dragging you to moratorium? Are you in foreclosure? Right? Are you in diffusion? Did someone assign you something and you don't want it anymore? Maybe you're in achievement in one realm. I promise you, if you're in achievement in one room, you can still be in moratorium in others, right? I've been a therapist for 16 years. I have achieved my identity in that area. Running, I'm in moratorium, you guys. I bought nicer shoes, working on it. Okay. But I want you just to think about that, of where you are, and it doesn't even matter where you are. Are you willing to shift? I don't know if you've ever heard that phrase in Optavia again, but be willing to shift. I saw somebody earlier, as I'm scrolling back through my slides, was talking about, they identified as something. I'm actually going to have my real good friend Amy come on and help us finish up and share her health story and her shift in identity when she came to Optavia. And Amy, can you just tell us what it was like to come to Optavia and what you were first identifying as?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jen, for asking me to share. And this topic really kind of made me nervous because I've studied the life book and the habits of health book, and this identity thing was not in there. And so I was really nervous to talk about this topic. But I am always up for a challenge, and I was just like happy to dive in and kind of think about it and get curious about it. And so when I started the program, I was, of course, skeptical, but I had seen other people do it and they had great results. And so I loved getting on the Wednesday night calls and just listening and learning. I love to learn. And going back, identifying like in my childhood, like I was always the one that kind of needed the extra help. And I identified as a little bit of more of the, definitely I was more comfortable in the learning position and not in the teaching position, because I was never that role in school or growing up. As I was always the one receiving like the help, and not the one that was in charge of like teaching. And so all through my life, I never identified as like the teacher or the coach or anything like that. So when my coach approached me to help coach, I was just like, oh no, that's not me. I love learning and I love getting on the calls and I love everything I hear, but I definitely did not identify in any way as somebody to be in charge of teaching others. And so that was my identity that I had. And so eventually I just got to a point where, I was had that fixed mindset that, I needed to know everything or I couldn't teach anything. And so eventually I got just open and curious and just thought, well, what if I did just teach what I had already learned? Because I had been a client for 2 years before I became a coach. And so I loved the calls, like I said, and I thought I could just share what I've learned. And maybe I won't word it exactly how it's in the book or whatnot, but I'll be able to guide them to that. And so eventually I got to a more open, curious mindset of just thinking, well, maybe I'll just try it and see what happens. And now I am just more eager to learn it. And I've read like in Dr. A's, not in the life book or the habits of health book, but he has the ebook, the Stop Challenge Choose book. And at the very end, there's a thing that says becoming a health coach from student to teacher. And I was like, wow, that's exactly where I felt like I was at, you know? And it says, one of the first thing it says is, if you want to really understand the depth of a topic, teach it. And that goes for health too. And health is no different. And it's a common wise thing among teachers that they know that that they learn more because they're the teachers. So sorry, Alexa's going off. Sorry. I'm supposed to take my son's tablet away right now, and it's reminding me that it's time to take his tablet. So I'm sorry about that. But yeah, that's a little bit of my story and my identity of going from student role to teacher role as a coach.
Thank you, Amy. That is so powerful. When she told me that she was in maintenance for a year before she decided to coach, I thought, gosh, some of us are so stuck in our identities, right? And I love coaching with Amy. I am so glad that we get to coach together, but I really appreciate that. I'm gonna turn the time back over to Amber and Jared, and we're gonna switch. If any of you are working on that identity shift, I think this would be a really good time to stay with us.
Awesome job, everyone. So, okay, thanks for joining Healthy Together Time tonight. And for the next 30 minutes, we are going to have 2 breakout sessions. So many of you are loving the health program and you've asked for more info about how to be 500% more likely to reach and maintain that healthy weight long-term, or how to reach into your community, bring others with you, or how to improve the health of your finances. So that will be the topic in this Zoom room. If you stick around, we'll also be offering a breakout room for any newer coaches on the team. If you're a new coach in the last little bit or want a refresher, we are going to have a breakout room with the Coaching Quick Start class. Otherwise, we will see you next week at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 6:30 Mountain. And next week, real quick, before we do our breakout room, let me show you. We have our Health and Hope Night, and it's going to be in a different Zoom room. The second Wednesday of the month will just be in a different Zoom room. So we're super excited for that. We'll send out reminder emails and things like that. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you're not sticking around, we will see you next week.